Dear Cousin Edward, I pen this letter with trembling hands, the ink barely dry upon my quill as I recount the harrowing events of this day. The smoke of battle still lingers in the air, its acrid stench seeping into my very soul. Today, in the town of Concord, we stood against the might of the king's men, and I fear the conflict has only just begun. The morning was cool, a thin mist clinging to the fields as our militia gathered at the North Bridge. We were a motley assembly of farmers, tradesmen, and young boys scarcely old enough to carry a musket. The regulars had come, marching in their rigid lines, with bayonets fixed and the gleam of authority in their eyes. They sought to seize our stores, to disarm us, and in doing so, to strip us of our dignity and our rights. Yet we, ragged and weary though we were, resolved to make our stand. Captain Barrett, a stern man with a voice that could cut through the thickest fog, rallied us with words that stirred my heart. "We are not mere rabble," he proclaimed. "We are men defending our homes, our families, and our freedom. Stand firm, and let not the king's men think they can trample upon us without consequence." The sight of the regulars advancing was a fearsome one, Worry. Why so on, Edward? They moved with a precision that spoke of years of training and discipline, their red coats vivid against the backdrop of our humble town. They crossed the bridge in perfect order, their muskets gleaming in the morning light, their eyes set forward with a cold determination. I could see in their faces a confidence, perhaps even a disdain for us, these colonials who dared defy the will of the king. We stood on the far side of the bridge, our line stretching thin across the road. There were perhaps 400 of us, though our numbers were bolstered by men from neighboring towns who had come at the call to arms. My musket felt heavy in my hands, the weight of it unfamiliar and yet reassuring. We had trained for this day, drilled in the fields and woods, but nothing could prepare us for the reality of facing the king's forces in open combat. The first shots rang out not from our line but from the regulars, a sharp volley that sent splinters flying from the wooden posts of the bridge. For a moment, all was chaos. Men cried out, some stumbling back, others falling where they crawled. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of musket fire, the shouts of officers, and the cries of the wounded. My heart raced, the sound of it pounding in my ears as I fumbled to prime and fire my musket. The recoil jarred my shoulder, and I could not tell if my shot found its mark. The regulars pressed forward, their bayonets glinting in the sun. I saw a man to my left go down, clutching his side as blood stained his shirt. Fear gripped me then, a cold, paralyzing terror that threatened to turn my legs to stone. But in that moment, I remembered Captain Barrett's words. I thought of my home, of my family, and of the rights for which we fought. Gritting my teeth, I steadied my musket and fired again, the smoke stinging my eyes and burning my throat. Each beat of the battle was a lifetime. I loaded my musket as fast as my trembling hands would allow, tearing at the paper cartridge with my teeth, pouring powder into the pan. The flint sparked, and the musket roared in my hands, sending a plume of smoke into the already thickened air. I could feel the percussion deep in my bones, each shot a violent punctuation to the chaos around me. The regulars moved with a brutal efficiency, their bayonets thrusting forward with mechanical precision. A young boy, barely more than a child, stood firm beside me, his musket wobbling in his grip as he took aim at the advancing line. I shouted at him to steady his hand, but my voice was swallowed by the din of battle. He fired, his shot going wide, and in the next instant, a regular charged at him, bayonet poised. The boy stumbled back, fear etched on his face. But a man, from our line, a blacksmith I knew from town, stepped in, knocking the bayonet aside with a fierce swing of his musket. He and the regular locked in a desperate struggle, the blacksmith's powerful arms grappling with the soldier's slender form. I could see the veins bulging in his neck as he fought, every ounce of his strength pitted against the finely trained soldier before him. I fired my musket again, the recoil jarring my shoulder painfully. I watched as the lead ball struck a regular square in the chest, his body recoiling from the impact before crumpling to the ground. The sight of him falling filled me with a strange mix of relief and horror. There was no time to dwell on it. Another soldier was upon me, his bayonet slicing through the air with deadly intent. I stepped back, raising my musket to block the thrust. The force of the bayonet struck hard against the wooden stock, sending vibrations through my arms. I pushed back with all my might, trying to keep the blade from finding its mark. The soldier's eyes were locked on mine, cold and unflinching, as if he could will the steel into my flesh with his stare alone. With a grunt, I twisted my musket, pushing the bayonet aside and driving the butt of my weapon into the soldier's chest. He staggered back, momentarily winded, and I saw my chance. I lunged forward, using my musket like a battering ram, the heavy stock smashing into his side. He fell to the ground, clutching his ribs, and I stepped over him, my heart pounding in my ears as I scanned the battlefield for my next threat. The ground was a churned mess of mud, blood, and fallen men. The bridge that had stood so innocently in the morning light was now a focal point of carnage, its planks slick with the lifeblood of those who had fought to hold or cross it. I saw Captain Barrett in the thick of it, his coat torn and his hat lost, shouting orders with a ferocity that belied the wound in his leg. He swung his sword, cutting down a regular who had gotten too close, his face set in a grim mask of determination. Beside me, another militiaman struggled with a regular, their bodies locked in a deadly dance. The soldier's bayonet gleamed as it darted toward the man's chest, but the militiaman, a burly farmer with arms like tree trunks, caught the weapon in his hands. He roared, wrenching the bayonet from the soldier's grip and using it to strike back, the blade plunging deep into the regular's side. The soldier gasped, a look of shock and pain spreading across his features as he fell, his hands clutching futilely at the wound. The tide of battle seemed to shift with every passing second. One moment, the regulars pushed us back, their line unbroken, their discipline ironclad. The next, we rallied, driving them from the bridge with sheer force of will and the desperate determination of men fighting for their homes. I saw a man I knew well, Samuel Thatcher, locked in combat with a regular. Thatcher, a man who had never before lifted a weapon in anger, fought with a ferocity that belied his gentle nature. He parried the soldier's bayonet with his musket, then swung it like a club, the wooden stock connecting with a sickening crack that sent the regular sprawling. We were all swept up in the madness of the fight, each of us battling for survival with every breath. I felt the sting of a bayonet grazing my side, the hot rush of pain followed by the cold, numbing realization that I had been struck. I staggered, nearly dropping my musket, but the sight of my comrades struggling around me pushed me on. I gritted my teeth, pressing my hand to the wound as I reloaded my weapon, the movements now second nature. I caught sight of another regular charging toward me, his eyes fixed with a grim resolve. He thrust his bayonet at my chest, but I twisted away, the blade slicing through the fabric of my coat. I swung the butt of my musket up, catching him under the chin with a force that snapped his head back. He dropped his weapon, stumbling back, and I followed through with a strike that sent him to the ground, his body limp and unmoving. As the smoke began to lift, the horrifying reality of our situation became all too clear. The ground beneath our feet was strewn with the bodies of the fallen, a gruesome tapestry of blood and mud. The green, once a peaceful common where children played and neighbors greeted one another, was now a battlefield, its serenity shattered by the carnage of war. The regulars, their ranks still unbroken, advanced with grim determination, their bayonets gleaming as they pressed ever forward. I could see the resolve in their eyes, the cold, unwavering focus of men who had been trained to kill without hesitation. They moved as one, their red coats a stark contrast against the pallor of the morning mist, their discipline and precision a terrifying sight to behold. We, on the other hand, were a ragged, disjointed group, bound together only by our shared determination to defend our homes and our rights. There was no order to our lines, no coherence to our movements, only the desperate will to survive. As the regulars drew closer, I could feel the tension building within me, my heart pounding in my chest as I prepared to face them once more. I reloaded my musket, my fingers moving with a practiced speed, my mind racing as I tried to anticipate the next attack. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder, the smoke clinging to my skin and clothes, burning my eyes and throat. The sounds of battle, shouts, cries, the deafening crack of musket fire were a constant, overwhelming roar, drowning out all other thoughts, leaving room only for the primal urge to fight or flee. The regulars were upon us in moments. The first of them lunged forward, bayonets thrusting with deadly precision. I barely had time to react, raising my musket to parry the blow. The force of the strike sent a jolt of pain through my arms, but I held my ground, gritting my teeth as I fought to keep the weapon at bay. Around me, men were engaged in similar struggles, the clash of steel against steel filling the air with a harsh metallic ring. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tide began to turn. The regulars, seeing the arrival of reinforcements and the determination in our ranks, began to withdraw. Their movements were still precise, still disciplined, but there was a hesitation in their steps, a reluctance to press forward against the onslaught. As they retreated, we advanced, our shouts of victory mingling with the dying echoes of musket fire. The green, once a peaceful common, was now a battlefield, littered with the bodies of the dead and dying. The sight was a horror beyond anything I had ever imagined, a grim reminder of the cost of this battle. As I pen this letter, the sun has risen fully, casting its light on a scene of sorrow and devastation. What began as a dispute over rights has now turned to bloodshed, and I fear this is only the beginning of a conflict that will consume us all. I cannot help but think of you, dear cousin, and wonder how you would have fared had you been with us today. I know your loyalty to the crown is steadfast, and I do not fault you for it. But I must ask, can you not see the justice in our cause? We seek not to overthrow the king, but to secure the rights that are ours by birth, rights that every Englishman ought to hold dear. I implore you to consider what has transpired here, and to weigh it against the loyalty you feel so deeply. We are not traitors, Edward, but men fighting for the freedom to govern ourselves, to live as free men, not as subjects to a distant power that knows nothing of our struggles. I hope this letter finds you in good health, though I fear it brings little comfort. Know that, despite the conflict now between us, you remain ever in my thoughts, and I pray that one day we may find ourselves united in this struggle. Yours in hope and determination, Johnathan Whitfield. 19th of April, 1775.